If you're seeing this, understand that this video actually won't start for 3 minutes. So you can fast forward 3 minutes. Two minutes, we begin. Hey, Robert. We're starting about 1 minute. Since you're on, hearing the voice okay? Are you hearing any echoes?
I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go.
Good morning. Welcome to Coffee Time Live. This show comes to you every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, from my balcony in South America. Okay, this may be the last week that we have this software. I'm struggling with all these delays. I know there's a delay from my voice to what the video looks like. Can't seem to get it cleared up. I've looked at other people that use this software and they don't seem to have a problem. So I don't know. I hate to go back to just YouTube because of all the problems and disconnects that I have, but looks like I might have to. So anyway, on this channel, if you find value, please subscribe, click the notification bell, like, blah, 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 you know, all that stuff. And of course, your contributions are welcome. You can use Patreon, you can use GoFundMe, you can use Google Pay, or you can contribute right in the chat here on YouTube. There's a little box there you can click. So any of those, greatly appreciated. I've got a goal every month to support the channel, and truthfully I'm way behind this month, but I expected it with Thanksgiving coming and Christmas. That's kind of the norm. Yes, it's out of sync. I know it's out of sync. I commented it's out of sync, and it's I can't seem to get it fixed, so that may be why I stopped using this software. It's been very frustrating. I'm sure for you too. I'm wearing my Ecuador hat today because one of the topics will include Ecuador. Today I'm going to talk about an apartment here in Armenia. I'm going to talk about the rain. Thank you, greatly appreciate it. Hold on. I don't want to lose anything. Okay. Yeah, more of the software issues. Oh, got somebody with no sync issues. Interesting. I have them. So I don't know. I'm at a loss. But where was I? Topics. Apartment here in Armenia. I'm getting a lot of questions about rain, so I want to explain again the little topic. Hugh75, and I know who you actually are. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. A Gringo meetup that I had this week. A video that's out that has a lot of people panicked about getting a visa. I want to address that. I'm going to have a little talk here that's a fair amount of it's just personal, but that's what these are about. It's me and my life in South America. It's search for freedom that I think some will identify, and I'll have a little something to say about Woodstock. And then I'm going to talk about Chile, Bolivia, Ecuador, what's been in the news lately. I keep getting comments or questions about that, so it won't be very long, but I'll quickly address it. I'm going to talk about Vilcabamba, Ecuador, because of a gigantic misconception. I want to set it straight. And that'll be it for today. There'll be time for questions at the end. 4 question marks. Preface your question, and I'll get to all your questions when we come to the end. So let's get rolling. Now, I told some of you about a blind Gringo that came down here, and I took him to Manizales and showed him around, and he got an apartment, and I interviewed him. And it was a lot of great comments about how intelligent he was and how useful his interview was. But I've also talked about another blind Gringo here in Armenia, and there's been some confusion. They are not one and the same people. Yes, there are 2 people, one slightly more blind than the other, very nice people, and one's here in Armenia, and he came down for about a month and a half to kind of check it out, and now he's come down for a year or forever. He hasn't decided. He's in process of getting his resident visa. And he was living in an apartment here in the North End, about 5 or 6 blocks from where I'm living. But it wasn't a great situation, I guess, and he was looking for something a little more permanent. So he uses an assistant. So she went out hunting, and she actually found one, happenstance, here in my building. And in a matter of a couple days, he made a great deal for the apartment and moved right in. He's on the floor below me, and fortunately he's very respectful because I'm such a private person. We contact each other and get together now and then, but he doesn't bother me, and hopefully I won't be bothering him beyond what we prearrange. But I want to show you this apartment, and hopefully the sound will work. I'm actually not positive that it will, but let's take a look. Okay, this is Justin's new apartment in my building. He got one that's a little size up. He's got quite a bit more room in the kitchen, and his comes with a little clothes dryer thing up there on the wall. He's got a bigger sink. Downside is this counter is right there at the door, which that could be a little awkward. His living room is bigger, and his balcony is off the living room, so that's nice, but it's smaller. It's actually quite a bit smaller. That's mine right there. So he's moving in on me. And his second bedroom is a full-size bedroom, so that's nice, not a tiny one like mine. Second bathroom, it's pretty much the same as mine, missing a cabinet. And his main bedroom is, I guess, kind of larger. It's actually, in a way, set up kind of like my living room. My living room has that and those kind of windows. Interesting. His bathroom, it's pretty much the same. And he's on the back side, so it should be reasonably quiet for him. That's Mokawa Apartments there. He's got closets, but he's got less closets. Mine actually run two more doors over. So, some pluses and minuses, but overall it's larger. Very nice. Paying $1 million, but his includes internet, so he doesn't have to deal with it. So the price is about the same as mine. So hopefully that worked for you and the sound came across. It's the first time I've run a video clip. That's one of the advantages of this software, is that I can do things like that. So he got a great deal on the apartment. He's living down there. He's been there for, I think maybe 2 weeks now. Settling in nicely, it seems. And so, mission successful. Now, rain. It's come up a few times with people that I think were maybe visiting here or getting some information about it's raining a lot. Yes, I was wearing shorts and I'm wearing shorts now. It's not taboo when it's just in your building. I never wear them out actually, but I just ran down to his apartment from mine and I just had my shorts on. Okay, so the rain. So I'm getting this comment about you're not being honest about the weather there because it's raining all the time. And I'm always honest about everything. I could care less about, it's like, I mean, why do you think I would not be honest about that? I have no vested interest in telling you, anything but the reality of what's here. It just so happens we're in the, I use my air quotes, winter season. This is the rainiest, coolest part of the year. They're very mild seasons and they don't vary that much. And I've told you that throughout the year we get rain most every day, but it's usually like little spritzes in the afternoon or in the evening. But for the course of, we'll say November and December, approximately, we get more rain. As a matter of fact, we've had a couple days in the last few weeks where it just seemed like it rained almost throughout the day. We only get a handful of days like that in a year, but we get them. Everywhere gets, something like that. And the temperature's cooler. We're not getting up really much higher than the low 70s in the day. At night it drops down in the low 60s, which is actually, I love it. I love this weather. I prefer it better than when we get into the low 80s. But yeah, we're gonna have rain, some more than others, but it's still, as you can see right now, know, we've got blue sky and sunshine, and that's the way it is most mornings, and then we get, you know, the rain later in the afternoon. It seems like lately it's been hitting around 3-4 o'clock for the most part. But I mean, you can't, I make jokes that you set your clock by it. You can't really set your clock by it, but that tends to be the pattern. And there's reasons for that pattern. I've explained that, and there's reasons why Manizales is the way it is and why Cuenca is the way it is. There's reasons why those weather pattern exists. It just so happens that we have one that's generally fairly predictable here in Armenia, which is one of the things that I love about it. Okay, so, oh, you know what? I'm such a terrible director. This is what I was going to play all the while I was talking about the rain. Okay, but too late now, I missed it. Gringo meet. As you probably know, and some of you watching, I've met with you in the past. When somebody comes to town, if it's at all possible, if I can work it out, we go meet for a coffee. They invariably have a ton of questions, and I'm happy to run my mouth for a couple hours. I had one this week just like that. Somebody who's down here for a week, you know, checking it out. It was a very decent person that is seriously thinking about moving here. Had some great questions and actually realized that he can retire here much quicker by a number of years than he expected. So just throw out there another Gringo meet. If you're in, you know, coming by this way, you know, give a holler. And if you have a lot of questions before you come down, I do Skype calls. The information is in the comment section. Now, I want to talk about this this visa panic that's going on. A video came out. What is it? How to expat? I think it is. That first of all, I'm going to say something. I have no problem with it. I have no problem with people, you know, doing business and making money. That's how the world goes around. I'm trying to make money off of these videos so that I don't have to pay out of pocket, so I can keep doing them. And there are people that are here, particularly if they're younger, that need to make full-time income. And this guy who put the video out, he makes his money off doing relocations. And it's a very good service. I can't vouch for him in particular because I don't know him. You know, I see his videos like some of you see his videos. But I was a little upset simply because of the reaction that I was getting over a video that he was talking about so-called changes to the visa for Colombia. And in watching his video, and I went back and I rewatched it, he did put in disclaimer a number of times. So, because I was a little upset at his video, but then I go back and I look at the disclaimer, and I didn't even catch them all the first time through. So I can understand, but his disclaimer was that this is not law. It's simply a proposal. It may or may not happen, and even if it does happen, like all laws, it'll be subject to amendments, modifications before it ever becomes law. And the biggest thing that people were freaking out about is right now, if you want a retirement visa, and that's most people that watch my videos and that contact, I think they were all, maybe all, with one exception, interested in retirement visa that watched his video that sent me off email or messages. And so right now, to get a retirement visa, you have to prove an income of about, depending on what the rate is, about $800 a month, which is, you know, pretty easy to do. I think it's the same amount in Ecuador. But in his video, he was talking about it jumping from $800 to $1,300. And I'm not even sure quite what he was referring to, because you would actually need to know that number in pesos because of the exchange, and it could be 11 or 12 or 13 or 14. But the bottom line is, this is not a law. It is a proposal. And similar to in the United States, when something is proposed, it goes through a process, and what comes out the other end, if anything comes out the other end, may be something completely different. So, is what an S7? My phone? It's an S8. I'm not sure. Not sure what the question is, but sorry for the distraction. So right now, it may have some effect on you if it ever does happen, but there's absolutely no reason right now to be worrying or stressing about it, because it's just somebody's words. It's there is a write-up, including a whole bunch of other things that I have seen, for the proposal. The proposal does exist, but there was a major change to the visa law 2 years ago. And so I'm not sure even what the appetite will be to go back and revisit and make a lot of big changes. Another huge change would be for the people who want to be a financial investor. So the amount has jumped, like, I think it's like $40,000 more or something. But again, it's strictly a hypothetical. Now is not the time to worry about it. And you can talk to visa facilitators or attorneys, and they're going to pretty much tell you the same thing. But if they're trying to drum up business, they'll say, well, get it now while you can. Well, okay, I get that. And if you do get it now while you can, and if anything ever does change, and things do change, then you're already in. But honestly, I don't want to read into people's motives, but it is a good way to kind of generate a bunch of income at a time of year when business is a little slow. That may have nothing to do with the purpose of that video. In watching, that was my first impression, but in going back and rewatching it, I think it was a legitimate, hey, I'm trying to give you a heads up. The only thing is, those disclaimers weren't enough, because a lot of people missed them, and a lot of people are kind of panicked. So cool your jets. There's no reason to worry about it right now. Okay, search for freedom. I've come to the conclusion that a lot of things we do in life is caused by this driving force of the need for freedom, for liberty. Now, I don't mean it in some cornball sense, although I'm a bit of a cornball, but I don't think we consider it enough. And when we're looking at our own motivations, I mean, one of the things, when you're considering coming to a place like this, I mean, you want to escape from, debt. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to run out on debts, but the cycle in the United States and even in Canada is to, buy things on credit, and then you end up with a payment, and it's just this, this cycle that a lot of people get caught up in. You've got credit cards, and it's like you put it on the cards and you're going to pay for it every month, but then something happens, and so then you end up with a credit card payment, and it's this burden that takes from your freedom. They say it enslaves. Well, I won't get that dramatic, but it certainly has an impact on you. Work, it's like, I love work, and it took me some time to learn how to not be a workaholic. No, this isn't workaholic. I put in, maybe 30, 40 hours a week, but I don't put in 120 like I used to. Work is rewarding, and I think most of us need it, but in the United States, we tend to enslave ourselves to it because we've got the debt, or we have all these goals and things that we want to do. And so, we end up working not just to live our life, but we end up working for all kinds of extraneous things. And even even the routine of it, getting up and going and what we do for lunch and going home, and we end up with maybe free time to watch the game and fall asleep on Sunday. I don't know how your life is, but it seemed like that was most of the free time I would have in my life. So at some point, we consider, what's it all for? What are we trying to do? And when you consider a place like here, you're really kind of considering, how can I be free? How can I find that freedom? And I've been on a quest for it my entire life, because I kind of raised myself as you that know my life story, and I left home at 15, and I always thought, or I told people, that I went to Woodstock and I was 15, but I had reason to think about this week, and I must have been 16. I must have been 16. Now what happened is, every so often I get on a music artist thing, so I put it on Alexa and I'll play it, over and over, and not the songs over and over necessarily, but day after day, or in the evening, or falling asleep, and I'll play that same artist. And this past week I was on this Neil Young kick, and it's hard for me to think of Neil Young and not think of Woodstock. And I recall, the reason I remember I had to have been 16 was because I was working at a resort, Sheraton, in Canandaigua, New York. And I know that's the case because the Volkswagen Beetle, they were so cheap and so easy to get. That's a friend who had a Volkswagen Beetle, and two other friends, one very good friend, who has passed. Well, actually, most everybody I know has passed away, but they met me in the parking lot, picked me up there. As soon as I finished my shift, we jumped in, and we headed to Woodstock. And it was really, I'll tell you how naive I was. I mean, the first girl I was ever with, in a biblical sense, I was 15. But back then was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? I mean, that's the way it was. And everybody was smoking weed. I think we called it pot back then. Now it's tree or whatever, but everybody was smoking weed. So they said that we're going to smoke weed on the way up to Woodstock because we're going to be cool. I'm 16. I think the driver was 17. Kermit, my other friend, he was 17, and the other guy was 16. So the four of us, we're on our way to Woodstock, and we're going to smoke weed. Well, I didn't know anything about it, and I had heard. This is a little embarrassing, but I just have to. I have to tell the world my how stupid I was, how naive I was. I had heard that you have to cut drugs, and if you don't cut drugs, it's dangerous. So I got pipe tobacco, and I brought it along, and they said, "Here, here's some weed." We're giving it to Kermit. "Here, roll up a joint. Roll another one." Anyway, I pulled out the pipe tobacco. "Here, you need this?" And they all looked at me like, and they all moved away from me on the bench there with a hairy eyeball. Until I said, "Oh, I was just kidding." And they all moved back, shook my hand. Some of you might get that reference. So I had this memory going on of Woodstock, and I was thinking about this freedom thing, because as we're driving up there, the mood, the feeling about this event that had never occurred prior, and we were going to be part of this. I remember having this elation that was freedom. And that weekend that we were there, outside of being soaked, and it was nasty and disgusting and over thirsty and all the problems there, but I'm 16 years old, so I didn't really think about those so much. And the music artists that were there, I hardly knew about any of them. I mean, the big name there was really Janis Joplin, but all the rest, Jimi Hendrix had just started to break out, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, I'd never even heard of them. Even though these artists had been around, they didn't have this world platform to to be on. So it was quite an event. You had all these people, smoking weed and doing acid, and everybody was, like, free love, and it was a crazy time, and probably the root of a lot of society's problems to this day. But it was a real event, and it really got me to thinking about this idea of freedom, and looking at my life and how many times I entrapped myself, and then how many times I fought to free myself. And I think, at least for me, it's been a driving force in my life to escape entrapment. And I think that maybe a lot of people that want to come to a place like this maybe sharing that same desire, that same experience. Okay, so that's my walk down memory lane, and I'm sure a lot of you could care less, maybe tuned out by now. But I do want to talk about Chile, Bolivia, and Ecuador. I'm getting these messages about what the heck is going on in South America. Is it blowing up? Is it, man, I need a haircut. Is it blowing up? Is it, things are going crazy down there. But I want you to understand this. I'm not going to go on a big tirade about this, but I want you to understand that each one is a different situation. In Bolivia, there's been a lot of years of oppression and corruption, and the people were simply fed up with fake elections. They're just fed up with it. And that's what that was about. They just had enough with that guy. They look out and they see what went on in Venezuela, and how he's aligned with Venezuela, and how their society has in some ways mirrored some of the things that occurred in Venezuela. So there's mixed feelings everywhere, and mixed politics, but it was essentially a people's rising, and the military, who was backing the president, kind of flipped the coin. And while it wasn't really a coup, it was headed to one. And I think he recognized that and bailed off to Mexico. I actually, personally, I think it's a good thing for Bolivia. It can't be any worse than what it's been. All the promised wealth never came to pass. In Chile, you have more of a income equality issue. But I also think that in Chile, possibly Bolivia, but I think in Chile and in Ecuador, you have external forces that's kind of been stirring the pot. They're ripe for, at the very least, protests. There are some things that really suck. I mean, there's some of the things I didn't like about being in Ecuador, and instead of necessarily getting better, it looked like it might be getting worse. And so if you're born and raised there, at some point you just kind of get upset with it. And I think you had people come in and stir the pot. All I want to say about that is I keep getting the CIA's doing it. And I mean, I'm not going to claim any great wisdom. I certainly have no insider information. I'm just like you. Except I do read a lot and talk to a lot of people, so it might give me a little edge in some ways, but basically I'm just Joe Schmo. But you have to look at things logically. The CIA, many, many years ago, had involvement, but you have to look at what was the purpose of their involvement. Whether you agree with it or not, they actually had a purpose. And it was about the Soviet Union and socialism or communism growing, and didn't want it in the Western Hemisphere, and they were doing whatever they could to subvert it. But it's not like that anymore. Soviet Union doesn't exist. The Russian army's not even a quarter of the strength of the United States. The world is a different place. China is much more of a player these days. to go in and try to subvert the governments of those, all for different reasons, and at least one of them was a popular uprising. It doesn't really make sense, because right now it's absolutely in the United States and Canada's interest in every way you can imagine to have stable countries in South America. Stability is the name of the game right now. We don't need more refugees. We don't need more turmoil. I mean, it just doesn't do any good. Canada, the United States are making money on trade, hand over fist. And you can't trade with people when the countries are shut down. So the theory just doesn't make any sense for me. But understand that it's not a matter of South America's blowing up. There are specific things. You had riots not so long ago in Baltimore. Does that mean, it's blowing up? You had riots, and I mean, people get upset, they'll protest, they'll riot, and those things happen. It happens in the United States, happens here too. I wouldn't have a whole lot of panic over it. I think it's more important to look at the type of government and how secure they are and how long that type of government has been in power. It's one of the pluses here in Colombia. They've been a constitutional republic for almost as long as the United States, which is the longest in the world. So, there's a certain amount of stability even when you have problems. Vilcabamba is a little town in the south part of Ecuador. It's south of Cuenca, south of Loja, although it's 30, 40 minutes, I think, maybe an hour from Loja. I've been there a whole bunch of times. It's a fun place to go. I would never want to live there, but it's a very nice place. And I wanted to bring it up because I didn't get one, but I got 2 emails this week about Vilcabamba, which is like out of the blue. Nobody ever asked me about Vilcabamba, but they said they're very interested in it because there's proof. There was another word. The evidence of you live a very long life in Vilcabamba, and I just want to let you know that that's a hoax. It's simply not true. There's this, is it in the water? Is it that just by the, fact of living there, that your life will be extended, another 20 years? And it's a hoax. It's actually kind of a joke with Ecuadorians. It's a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it brings money in, so, it's not, they don't really want to, dismiss it publicly. But it started many years ago when there was this really old guy who was the oldest guy in the area, and when asked how old he was, he didn't, like me, I didn't have a birth certificate when I was born. I didn't get one until I was 5 years old, starting school. In Ecuador, when he was alive, it was the same thing for him. So he had no evidence of when he was born. And maybe kind of like I couldn't even remember, how old I was when I went to Woodstock till I actually really thought about it. That when asked how old he was, he just kind of pulled something out of the hat. And there was people in town that had guessed that he was like 120, or I don't remember the exact amount. And so the person, posing the question went away with this. And since then, there's been various studies, and there's been some hoaxes pulled on outside media that come in. The truth of it is, outside of anywhere you go that you're going to live a, easy, comfortable life, which you can live there or many places, particularly if you're retired, that you can extend your life. But Vilcabamba itself is not the valley of longevity as it is promoted or talked about. It simply is not true. There is no basis for it. There's been enough studies on it now to know that it's just not the case. Oh, somebody else who was in Woodstock. Yeah, I was in Canandaigua, New York. I don't remember how long it took us to get there. I remember that when we arrived, there was just a country road, which was typical. We had to park. It turned out we guessed, we tried to look on the map, and we guessed we had to walk about 10 miles to get there, because when we arrived there was already so many people. A lot of people came a day or two before and camped out. I don't recall exactly when we arrived, but I remember the very first artist was Joan Baez, and I absolutely hated Joan Baez. It was a real snooze fest. So we're there at the beginning, and the good bands, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Jimi Hendrix, they were on the last day. I think it was a Sunday. They were on the last day, and I was there for that. So we were there throughout. We actually had tickets. We weren't with the, later when they jumped the fence. But I'll tell you this, back on the Woodstock thing, what surprises me to this day is the most impressive music, and I'm not sure exactly why, but I walked away so impressed. There was this guy called Richie Havens, who I had never heard of, and I'd never heard of after, actually. He did this song sheer by coincidence for my topic, freedom, 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 and his foot was going like crazy, and he had these long pointed shoes, and he was sitting on this stool, and he was tapping, and I was up close to the stage when he was there. We were a little further back on a lot of where our camp area was, but I went up and I was watching him, and I loved the song, even though it was like this repetitious thing that I normally wouldn't like, but I loved it. I loved this foot tapping. I can't really even put my finger on it, but I was hooked on it, and to this day I will still dig up that song and play it every so often, and I just love that song. So here you are sitting with all these famous artists, and the one that most impressed me at that time was this guy Richie Havens. Okay, we're to question time. 4 question marks. I see one already. 4 question marks. Ask the question, and I'll see if I can answer it. Impressions to share about Loja. Loja is a pretty awesome place. Unfortunately for me, it's in Ecuador. Again, I'm not slamming Ecuador. I said for me. There are drawbacks for me in Ecuador that I came to realize. But in Loja, if there's a city in Ecuador that probably would be the most suited, I think for a lot of people, might be Loja. It's much friendlier than Cuenca. Where Cuenca, you see a lot of people kind of walking around with scowls, and it's a little jaded. Maybe too many gringos have come through. I don't know what it is, but in Loja, it's kind of free from that. You have hardly any. You have some gringos there, and there's a little community, but it's small. It might be a few hundred, but there's pretty much everything there. The climate is much nicer, I think, than Cuenca. It has a lot of similarities to Armenia. It has a elevation that's not much more than here. It's got temperatures that are more similar to here. Are there any drawbacks? Well, you pretty much need to have Spanish there. Here in Colombia, people go out of their way to try to help you with the language. People all have some sort of English in their background, so they can't speak English, but it helps tune their ear a little bit, maybe. In Loja, well, people I found to be very, very friendly, very nice in Loja. They seem to be kind of like blown away with the English language, don't want any part of it. And again, I'm generalizing. I mean, it's not everybody. But if you're considering living in Ecuador, Loja is certainly, I think, a very viable place to look at. What are the Loja drawbacks? I don't know. For Ecuador, I don't know that there's a lot of drawbacks. It's can't think of any offhand. No, it's a nice place. It's not for me, obviously, because I'm not living there. But I was every time I went to Vilcabamba, I spent a little time in Loja, and I went down independently just for Loja. Walked through a lot of the city, visited a lot of things that are there. You know, I liked it. For what it is. I just it's the country of Ecuador that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in. But for a city in Ecuador, I think it's a real good choice. What did Woodstock smell like? Be descriptive. Well, when I first got there, it was kind of nice. I'll tell you what was really gross. There was a pond uh, near where this big crowd was. It was a massive crowd. It took you forever, and it started raining. But at first, you had people that were basically going in the pond, and a lot of skinny dipping. As a matter of fact, I think there's archive pictures of skinny naked girls swimming in the pond, and that's the way it was in the beginning. We walked back there. We weren't back there very long, but on the first day, at some point, we're kind of roaming all around, and we walked back there and saw naked girls and guys, and there was a lot of sex going on everywhere. But the pond was a nice pond. Well, then the rain started coming, and people were there for a while, and things happened like the what do you call it, the portable toilets. They were getting filled up. There were long lines, and then they were getting filled up, and they couldn't even get trucks in to replace them, and so people just started crapping all over the place. And it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and it turned out that this beautiful field was on a hill, but everywhere was kind of muddy. Part of it would drain, so it's not so bad. Other parts were like mud slip and slides, and the pond just got grosser and grosser and grosser. People started peeing and pooping, and the rain would wash it down. It got nasty, and the smell. By the time you got to we'll say later in the second day, it was pretty ripe. It was pretty ripe. 3 days of mud and excrement. Yeah, well, probably a good day, almost day and a half. Yeah, that's true. And you had some. Well, I don't want to get graphic, but people would be vomiting, and there was a lot of stuff going on. From the time I got sick in the U.S. until today, how long? Well, the entire time period from that first nosebleed, that symptom, to when I was cured and headed for a plane for Quito, was almost 3.5 years. 2.5 years I had to live in bed. I couldn't move around, and I was stuck in bed. If I needed to use the bathroom, I was in my apartment most of the time. I would have to crawl on my hands and knees. All my food was KFC, home delivery, and things like that. It was not a good time. So that was 3.5 years, and I've been here in South America over 4 years now. I think 4 years and 2 months. So from the time I got sick to now, 4, 5, 6, 7.5, almost 8 years. Walk through the process of going to South America. Good move. Well, it's a great move for me. I'm really happy. I have no plans on returning, and it's not. I'm not one that has anything wrong with any problem with the United States. I love it. I think to sound corny, it's probably the best country in the world in so many ways. It has nothing to do with that. I just really love being here, right where I am. I love it. Initially, I came down here to escape uh, because of the illness, to get away from people and just kind of maybe recover. And at that time, I didn't plan to go back, but in the back of my mind, it was, a good possibility. But as I spent more time down here, I realized I just wanted to live down here. And I knew that I wanted to, at some point, I knew that I wanted to live in Colombia. That's why I made 7 trips back and forth while I was living in Ecuador to kind of work out how that would be. Was it a good move for me? I I couldn't be happier in a place than where I am right now. I mean, you can ask me next year, but last year I said the same thing. I'm really happy with being here. I wouldn't change it for anything. I've tried to explain without getting too emotional in various videos about what's in it for me, but it's my home now. It's where I am. Did I ever think, what did I do? No, not once. I'm not like that. My life has been assess, evaluate, figure out the good and bad, make the decision. Once I make the decision, then I'm there. And if something keeps coming up that is going to maybe cause me to change my mind, I don't think about what did I do. I just go through that process again. I'll reevaluate and I'll look at this and that and the other thing and then make another decision. And that's what I did when I moved from Ecuador to Colombia. It wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't an instant thing. It was, I gave it a lot of thought. And like I said, a number of trips over here. I had lived here before. So it was well thought out. So I think when you go through a process where you put as much time and energy as I do in making decisions, then you don't have that, oh my God, what did I do? I mean, I suppose it could happen. All of these things are personal. I mean, someone else could maybe come down here. Maybe they get down here and have some sort of bad experience that would be unique to them, and it just, out of sheer coincidence or the spin of the dice or the spin of the wheel from life, and maybe you would say, oh my God, what did I do? And turn and run back home. But I don't really meet people like that. Well, Blind Man in Manizales. This is a guy, if you watched his interview, he's lived in places throughout the world. He is a worldly guy. But he got to Manizales, and that thing that's hard for me to explain, but he got there and he felt like he was at home. I sent him a message the other day. I check up once in a while, and it's, so how you doing? Did you make a good decision? You need anything? You settled in okay? How's it going? Marco, he's calling himself now. And he says, well, tonight I got a party. I got 15 people coming over to my apartment. We're going to have a little party. And so, I mean, he's definitely assimilated. He's settled right in. He's living a great life. He's doing really well. So, I mean, it's here if you want it, if it's your cup of tea. I do think it takes a certain amount of a type of personality that is okay with making that leap to something, new and foreign and language and all of that. But if you're of the type that will, find your way to get past the obstacles, there's a lot to be had here that I could not find anywhere else. Are there any cities, medium or major, with a lower cost of living than Armenia? How low do you need to get? I mean, the cost of living here is amazingly low. Basically, like I said, it's about 25% of what it costs in the United States. It's about half to 2/3 of the cost of living in Medellin. It's considerably less expensive to live here than Cuenca. I mean, I can live here on almost half the money in Cuenca for lifestyle to lifestyle. So, are there any others? I mean, I don't know. I've gone to a lot of different places. I've shown you Cali. I've shown you Ibagué. Uh, if you get to a southern place like Pasto, it might be a little cheaper to live there. But then again, you're going to give up a lot of the amenities that you have here. You might as well just go right to Ecuador. There are places in Ecuador. Cuenca is not cheap, but little places like when I lived in Giron, it was a lot cheaper. It was actually similar to the cost of living here in Armenia. If you want to live in a small town with 2,000 people and take a bus for 40 minutes to get to the big city of Cuenca. But if there's a cost of living that differs much, most places are a little more than here. But like I say, if you go south, Pasto might be, a little cheaper. But this is what I would suggest is if you're really looking for the absolute best bargain, there's going to be drawbacks with it, security and some things like that. But you could live here, even in Armenia, considerably cheaper than I'm living. I just happen to want to live in this great part of the city. But you can live in lower income areas that can be very safe, pay less than half of the rent that I'm paying here. Or you can get out in the countryside a little bit and find some good bargains there. But cost of living, again, I've talked about that so much. So much of that really depends on you and your type of lifestyle, because some things are more, some things are less, so it depends on the kind of lifestyle you have that's going to dictate a lot of that. Okay, last call for questions. Any more questions? Hugh, thank you for the donation. I really appreciate it. Last call. Going. Okay, thank you. I will see you next Sunday.